Mark, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for being here.
Well, thank you. Thanks for the opportunity to share our story a little bit.
I'm really excited to talk about culture. I think it's a perfect time. It's on everybody's minds, from the employees to leadership. So I'm really excited to get into this topic with you. But I start off every conversation just trying to get a little backstory about you and some of your own career decisions to give our audience a flavor of sort of what's out there. So I really start with the question, can you tell me about your first job?
Oh, yeah. First real job?
Yeah.
not counting paper routes and selling Grit magazine and door-to-door stuff. Yes, it was a maintenance and security job at a rest home, at a nursing home. And my sister, who's been a nurse for years, told when I was 14, said, "I got a job for you, weekend job after football." And I went, "Okay, let's do it." And so for 4 years, I got to build friends with people much older than me.
Excellent. What did you, were there any takeaways from that kind of influenced your life or your career track?
Yes. One, people with experience tell amazing stories.
Yeah.
And two, those people just want to be heard. I used to get in so much trouble because my boss would walk by and I'd be sitting in a chair talking baseball or talking work or life. And "Mr. Babbitt, that's not what we pay you to do." Well, okay. Well, I didn't know it back then, but we were relationship building, and people loved it when I walked in their room because, we could sit down and tell stories, and nothing's changed, by the way. I mean, I'm 60 years old now and nothing's changed, except maybe we do it more digitally now than in person, but everybody has a story to tell and everybody wants somebody to talk to.
Very interesting. Yeah, I come across this storytelling aspect all the time, and certainly from a cultural perspective, story really matters in what people gravitate towards and hold on to. So it's vitally important. Really interesting story there. How did you talk a little bit about how you went from kind of that job and maybe meandered or straight lined, I'm not quite sure, into the work that you do now, helping companies develop their culture, and you're a consultant, you are a speaker, you're an author. What sort of led you in that direction?
Well, first of all, thank you. Meandering is a polite word. I went in the military right out of high school. 3 days after I graduated, I went in the Air Force, became an engineer there, let the Air Force pay for my education, and did what every military trained engineer does. When you get out, you go to Silicon Valley, which is where I spent the next 20 years of my life, but only about 10 of it in engineering, because I realized, and it was on a late Friday afternoon, very frustrating day, working for this old school engineering company based out of Boston, and they weren't at all interested in making it a great place to work. You just show up, do your job, shut up, rinse and repeat. And so one Friday afternoon, I went, "This is not who I'm supposed to be. This is not what work is supposed to be." And I walked out, and that was 1990. So for the next 31 years, I've worked for myself, and knowing that I gave the corporate culture thing a good try. I knew I could never go back to it, and I haven't. Now, it doesn't mean to say that I haven't meandered still, but I happened to fall into the startup world in Silicon Valley after I left my engineering position, and thankfully did very well there. And from there, that's kind of how I got where I am now. Is we were competing with Monster.com when my startup was competing with Monster.com when nobody even knew what online recruiting was. And so I got entrenched in the career space, and eventually became the CEO and founder of my own career site, and still alive today. And what I found out, Michael, was that we're sending people out into the workplace, and it sucks. It's people didn't find it any more fulfilling than I did. And so people are, they're working hard to get their college education. They're working hard to build their personal brand, and they get their, quote unquote dream job. And then they get out there and find out it's not fulfilling at all. And so between mentoring other startup founders and saying, you can't be that company, and doing some executive coaching, and continuing in the career world, I found a niche in the leadership world where we could talk very deliberately about creating an uncompromising company culture where people knew what they were going to get when they showed up, from the job interview process all the way until they left that company to find a better company or better situation for them. We talked about culture, and that's where the book Good Comes First comes from.
Excellent. So I want to set some foundational pieces here. I mean, I think we all sort of, if we've worked for a company, large or small, you have experienced culture. But can you give us kind of the Mark Babbitt definition of culture?
Yes, culture is, in layman's terms, culture is how we get our work done here, and there's a lot that goes along with that. The personal interactions, the potential for personal and professional growth, the relationship with our direct supervisor, of course, but more importantly, it's how top leadership, like up in the C-suite or down the hall with the door closed all the time, how do they interact with the people every day? What's it really feel like to work here? What when you get off the train or you park your car and you shut the door and you turn around, you look at that building, how do you feel? Like, are you excited to walk in that door? It's like, oh crap, I know I'm just here to pay the bills. That's culture.
So it's a kind of it's a feeling generated amongst everyone in the company, or at least that's part of it. What are some elements, I guess, of a good culture that generate positive feelings, and how do companies seemingly mess that up so much?
Well, they do mess it up so much. Culture is defined by everybody in the company, everybody who walks through that door, from the newest intern to the CEO. We all have a hand in culture and how we react to the existing culture, our ability to change culture one human being at a time. The key thing is, are you a constructive element of the culture, or are you helping the culture not be so great? And that's what we talk about with young careerists all the time is don't just live the culture, figure out how you can help change the culture. So and we do that by and it sounds really simple, just respecting those around you, and especially for leadership, make the showing of that respect just as important as the results. We have 8 million ways to as leaders to track results. We have dozens of ways of employees to check our productivity and to see how well our boss thinks we're doing. But we don't, corporate America has very little ways of actually tracking how well their culture is doing. They certainly don't have any way of quantifying the level of respect shown. And that's what we're trying to change.
Respect is one of those things. I guess it's a little bit of a hot button thing for me right now, nationally and politically.
Yes.
as well, right? So it seems like you're fighting an uphill battle in some ways, because I guess the level of discord and just civility seems to be in such a bad place. How are you thinking about that generally?
So Michael, that was the impetus for this book.
Okay.
It was, I wrote a book quite some time ago, and it went amazingly well. But it's a lot of work, and it takes me away. The writing process takes you away from your business. It takes you away from your family. You have to be fully entrenched in that process. And so I swore I'd never do it again. And here we are doing it again. But 2015, 2016, you could see the tsunami of trolls coming at us. And my co-author and I, Chris Edmonds, just looked at each other and said, we've been talking about writing a book together forever, and I can't imagine a better time. It's the divisiveness, the polarization, the quick trigger to judge people just because they might have a slightly different opinion than you do. And we said, this cannot impact the workplace like it has politics. like it has social discourse, like it has social media. And so that's what, about 3.5 years ago, we finally said, we got to write this book. Well, then you get so busy and stuff that, it doesn't happen as quickly as you like. Well, then the pandemic hits, and now we got all kinds of time because we're not going anywhere. We're not traveling. We're not consulting. We're not speaking. And so you can imagine how relieved we were to actually go, wow, we actually have time to do this. And as you know, the civil discourse only got worse as we were writing it. And I remember several times writing a chapter or even a page in the book and just going, I got to turn off the news because I can't convince people how important it is to show respect and watch the world around me right now, because those two things are diametrically opposed. And so it was a difficult time to reconcile everything that you just talked about with what we were trying to accomplish with the book. It was a challenge.
What is the central theme, central tenet of the book? Let's get into that a little bit and talk to me about, we got sort of the why, right? What's the what that kind of gets through this book? What do you think is going to cut through, I guess, this time that we're living in?
Well, what we talk a lot about, Michael, is good people doing good work in a good place to work. And we deliberately made that as simple as possible. Mm-hmm. And if we're surrounded by people that we may not agree with all the time, but at least they show us respect, and in turn we show them respect. If our leaders do make respect just as high of a priority as they do results, so we're not just getting the work done, we're getting the work done in a human, fulfilling, validating manner. That's it. And that's where, the title "Good Comes First." Well, define good. And so we literally have to start the book with saying, we can't help you define good. You as a company, you as an employee, you have to figure out what's good for you. And a big part of that now is the whole remote work thing. We have companies that are forcing, after 18 months of freedom and autonomy and happiness and more balance, are forcing people back to work. And you've seen the news, so have your listeners. People are voting with their feet. They're going, why? You're making me come back to a culture that sucked to begin with? And no, I'm happy now. I get to be with my kids, my dogs, my cats, my elderly parents, extended family. I have a voice in when, where, and how the work gets done. And now you're going to take all that away? No, I'm just not going to work here. And so we say all the time, Michael, there's no labor shortage. There's a respect shortage. We're just not treating people well. And that's for the leadership perspective. That's what we're trying to ask leaders to do. Just start treating people well. Do good. And from the employee perspective, we're trying to say, don't tolerate that kind of culture. You have choices. You worked hard to get where you are. Go find the culture that works just right for you.
I wanted to ask a question about, I guess, on the specific topic of bringing people back to work. I want to just poke in here a little bit. What is, in your view, what is behind that? The forced bringing back to work? Is it, I in my head, I could see it being, okay, we have a lot of legacy assets that we're just not using. And so it's just kind of a backward thinking, okay, we have to utilize these things. There's also a level of, I need to watch you type thing, which is probably perceived as negative. And then, you can also make an argument for, a good productive reason, which is I as a leader believe our company is more productive here. We get more spontaneous things going, all of that kind of thing. What, in your view, what are you hearing as being the main driver of these companies forcing people back?
Well, I think there is some good, and I'm glad you brought that up, because companies aren't just trying to be jerks. They're trying to find the right balance for the company, just like we've tried to find the right balance for ourselves, right? So we when we're together, we collaborate more. We learn about each other more. The whole water cooler conversation thing. We engage more. We see smiles. We make eye contact. right? There's a lot of important things that happen when we're all together. And I think in general, people miss that. They missed having a one-on-one with their boss, right? That wasn't on a Zoom call, right? But then when they're forced to come back to work full time, they revolt. They say, no, I'm not going to do that. Or they ask the question, why are you making me do this? And unfortunately, the answer is too often, well, that's just the way we've always done it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we've invested a lot of money in the cubicles and the rent space and the building and, you know, the infrastructure, the resources, and we're wasting it now. And that's not a great answer. And I'll tell you that the people, and we actually have a name for this in the book, the people that are trying to force people back to work full time are mostly older white male legacy leaders that have been around forever, that aren't good at showing empathy, that aren't good at showing some level of understanding that the world has changed. Well, but they don't want their world to change. Well, that's a disconnect. And so we refer to the people in the book that are really struggling with this return to work strategy as suffering from boomer male syndrome. I mean, if most strong, dynamic female leaders, a lot of leaders that are people of color, they're saying, you know what, the world did change, and it hasn't always been easy for me, and I want to make it easy for my employees. So yes, I'd like them back in the office because there are all those positives about that, but maybe we can have them in the office 2 days this week and 3 days next week. Maybe we can let them pick the days that are most important to them. My daughter has a soccer game on Thursdays. I'd like to be home on Thursdays, right? My son plays baseball on a Monday, Wednesday, Friday. I'd like to be off Monday, Wednesday, Friday afternoon, and let them co-create that part of the culture. Old white guys just aren't into that. It's like, no, show up, do your damn job, go home. And it's not working. It's not working for them. It's not working for the workforce.
Yeah, there's definitely an old school mentality without a really good sort of logic reason behind it, which is sort of an interesting dichotomy in and of itself. I think for sure we're seeing like when you were talking, I was just thinking about like the skills of the future. Like, what are the skills that matter? And it's definitely, you know, realizing there are these sunk cost fallacies out there, right? And seeing that, and then being able to, I guess it's like futuristic thinking, like where do we want to go? How can I adapt? And I think like that's where you see the difference in the generations in terms of, you know, to generalize, right? The difference in thinking is like, no, there's a industrial revolution. Here's how we do it, cookie cutter mentality. And then there's a, holy cow, really dynamic, I got to be on my feet and constantly reassessing and adapting mentality. And I think like that's where we're seeing like this generational turnover, at least in my mind. And when I think about skills for the future, it's all about adaptation, constant feedback, and being nimble and on your feet.
Well, Michael, I couldn't have said any of that any better myself. We some of us old white guys have been talking about the future of work for years, right? And yes, I get a little crap going, wait a minute, you're calling out old white guys. You're an old white guy. Yes, I am. I can't change that. That's who I am, right? So, but we've literally, I mean, I remember sitting in New York in 2010, IBM invited a whole bunch of us in to say, what does the future of work look like? This is 10, 11 years ago now. And it was remote working. It was digital leadership. It was communicating socially more than and digitally more than in person. And we knew this was coming, a decade ago. And yet we have those leaders who are just saying, nope, that doesn't work for me. The CEO of Goldman Sachs says, well, that doesn't really work for us. Well, what? Your employees don't agree. Your employees don't miss that commute into New York at all.
Yeah.
They don't miss the stress. They don't miss the aggressive behavior from leadership at all. And so what a surprise, people are leaving their jobs.
Yeah, inertia is such a big player in this, right? Like when you're talking about going into leadership meetings with CEOs and they're saying, okay, it's just easier to continue on the path rather than create a new entire decision. I already have to make thousands of decisions, right? Like I got this whole new decision, but it sometimes takes an event, right, to really show evidence and really change everybody's minds. I mean, again, I've been remote working for myself with a team for years and years. So pandemic was nothing new to us at all. Like we were all doing this, right? And now I'm watching all of my sort of corporate peers go, oh my God, what do I need to do? So it's really an interesting time it's really forced some hands. And now leaders, as you know even better than I am, are kind of scrambling with what to do. So do you think that just in terms of remote, let's just stick with remote for a second. Do you think the tide has changed there? Is the conversation now, okay, how do I plan for this and build a new, rethink my entire workplace? Or is there still this, no, we're going to be in the office and I need to wait and see type attitude?
Yeah, there's both, Michael. In the old school industry, especially the financial world, the Chase Banks, the Goldman Sachs, the Solomons of the world, they're going, nope, we're going to dig in. We don't care if you're happy or not. If you want to work for a major Wall Street firm, you're going to come to the office. And it's not working very well for them at all. Other companies are saying the new world's here. The future of work is already here. Yes, it hit us 7 years earlier than we thought, but let's adapt. Let's listen. Let's rather than force people back into the old normal, let's work with our employees to co-create the new normal, the next normal. And that's where people want to work. And it's hard now. Granted, and we all know this, right? If you're in the hospitality world, pretty hard to work from home, right? If you're a teacher, not impossible if all your students are also at home, but if the students are in school, you have to be in school. This isn't a global problem. It's an industry or a sector issue, and we'd like to see leaders, especially in the more entrenched, the more old school industries. We'd like to see them more responsive to this change what's already happened. It's not coming at us anymore. It's here, and my friend, you got to deal with it, and you're not dealing with it very well. And nobody wants to go back to that old culture. Nobody wants to go back to that old life. A survey came out, Best Practices Institute, only 10% of human beings, employees, wanted to go back to work full time, but 83% of CEOs want their employees back full time.
Yeah.
Oh, how do you close that gap? I mean, that's not a little bit off.
Yeah.
That's a major disconnect. And you're really going to tell 90% of your employees, screw you, you're out of here? No, you're not, because that's not good for business either. So market conditions, as you said, reality changes minds, reality changes behaviors. And that's really what we're talking about when we talk about good comes first. Do the right thing. Do what's good for your employees, because if you do what's good for your employees, if they're genuinely happy, fulfilled, validated, trusted, they're going to do better work for you. And it isn't just a kumbaya, foo-foo, make everybody feel good, we're going to come sit around the fire and play guitar. It's not like that at all. It's treat people well and they'll work harder for you. And so treat people with respect, and the level of results go up, not down, not sideways. In every single case, all the research we did for this book in our consulting practice, every time we start letting people co-create their new normal, every time we start treating people with respect, and by the way, expect our employees to treat each other and their managers with the respect they've earned, results go up.
Right. I just love how respect is this foundational layer. And I know it's still a little bit of, okay, how do we put that into practice, right? But it's such a good starting point and so refreshing. I want to ask a couple questions around individuals and how they can contribute and all of that to culture and cultural change. But just pulling on that respect thread one more time. I think on your website for the book, like the process is really, really simple, right? It's define, align, refine. And we talked a little bit about the definition of good, and people have to kind of do that for themselves. Companies sort of have to do that for themselves, at least around good. But can you expand on that a little bit? Like, are there any guardrails for leaders to kind of start with? How are we just defining our culture today?
Well, most of us don't, which is the problem, right? We see the mission statement that's nailed to the wall in the lobby. We talk all the time about our quote unquote values, our core values. But let's just say one of the core values is integrity. And then the third quarter report maybe isn't going to look as good as we told our shareholders it was going to. So now it's all hands on deck. Everybody's into sales. We have to drive revenue, because if we at least hit our revenue numbers, even if we don't hit our profit numbers, now the shareholders won't have a stroke, right? So in that process, we treat each other disrespectfully. We ask people to work longer hours, right? That's not good, right? That own that third quarter report, but let's not beat your employees to death. Let's not lie. Let's not cheat. Let's not steal. Let's not fudge the numbers. You say your core value is integrity, but we're watching you do the exact opposite, right? And that's a big part of it. So there are a couple foundational elements that go into this defining of good, getting right to your question. One, the foundational principle is that respect must be as important as results, period, end of story, or you can't have a good company culture. And the data proves that out. Second, the leaders of the company must be chief role models for the values they helped define, no matter what they are. And every company's got different values. I mean, yes, there's some overlap, but you got to, as a leader, you have to live the values that you said we're going to run our business by. And if you don't, then pretty soon you're the CEO that gets caught on video kicking the puppy in the elevator, right? No, sorry, I no longer trust you. I no longer believe in you. You're not living the values yourself. So I don't have to either. I don't have to treat people respectfully. And then when you finally get those two layers laid down, right, now we can start building. And we start building, Michael, by picking 4 or 5, not 20, not 30, but 4 or 5 core values. And they vary so much between a company. We had a company we work with said, well, we want to be irreverent. Well, one, most people don't even know what that word means. Fun, right? Well, then how do you define fun, right? And so we helped them. It took a couple months, but they wanted to be a fun company to work for. Okay, but you can't just throw out the word fun, because fun means, to an extrovert, fun means something much different than an introvert, right? To somebody that's paying the bills, not living paycheck to paycheck, fun is much different than somebody that's just barely getting by, or the janitor versus the chief engineer, right? So it turns out you can define fun or integrity or trust or good communication or collaboration by saying, okay, what does collaboration look like? Let's take integrity, for example. We have companies that say integrity is like the hallmark. That's the main core value, right? It's to them, integrity is the same as respect is to us. It's like a foundational thing. Well, if you ask 20 employees what integrity means, you're going to get 19 different answers, right? So we have to sit down, and we have clients. We had a client who did it quite well. They finally said, we keep our promises. Oh my God, so simple, right? To our customers, to our vendors, to our stakeholders, to our employees, to each other, we keep our promises. Well, then we can now survey the employees 6 months from now and say, how does your manager do on the integrity value? Does she keep her promises? Does she do what she says she's going to do? Does she insist you keep your promises? We rate that on a scale of 1 to 6, and we have very quickly an assessment, a quantified assessment of something as emotional as integrity. right? Or as open to interpretation as integrity. And so that's what we do, Michael, is we say you can't just throw out these values. You actually have to measure them.
Mm-hmm.
Leader by leader, team by team, executive by executive. You have to measure your ability to live those values. And if you get a 2, 3, 4, right now you suck, and we need to fix that. We're not going to punish you for it. We're going to coach you on it. We're going to mentor you for it until you prove we can't.
Mm-hmm.
Until you prove you're not going to, you've chosen not to personally align to that value. Now we're going to have a tougher conversation. We're going to lovingly set you free. We're going to go let you succeed somewhere else. But if you can't align to that value in this company, and this is where uncompromising company culture comes in. If you can't align to that value, you can't work here.
Interesting. Yeah. What's measured gets managed, right? And so you got to be able to somehow, give yourself a rating on that stuff.
Well, and Michael, how many years have we talked about this?
Right.
You can only manage what you measure, but we don't measure values. Again, we have 400 different ways of measuring results, but we don't have any way of measuring respect. And that's what needs to change.
We talked a lot about leaders, and I want to be respectful of your time, but I want to ask a few questions real quick about the individual contributors, the individual employees, managers even, and what they can do around making culture better. So, I mean, what role does an individual employee have? I've heard you say the words co-create, and I think really early on in our conversation, you said everybody has a role to play. What is that? What can people do?
Well, first of all, we have to find out what the real culture is. Not what that first paragraph of the job description says, fast-paced, dynamic, blah, blah, blah. That's all crap. It's not real, right? It's what they think they have to do to get your foot in the door. So now they can sell you on the open opportunity, right? It's not what the About Us page it says. It's not what the careers page says. You have to dig into this and don't just settle for going to Glassdoor or Indeed and looking at the employee reviews, because some of those are just jaded. They're not objective at all. And some of them are frankly fake, right? So you can't just settle for that. Oh, they have a 93% score. Well, that's great, but who wrote the 93%? And were they objective? But you actually have to dig in. Somebody or somebody that knows somebody who worked at that company, right? Or let's just say it's a smaller company and you don't have that. Go to their social media account. How are they treating their customers? How are they treating their employees? Right? Here's a real big one, because in addition to the major culture, the ideal culture that even the best companies have defined, there are subcultures. And Michael, you know this. How many people accept a job offer they never even met their boss?
Mm-hmm.
Well, how do you know what that boss's subculture is? How do you know what their leadership style is? And it's not that hard to find out. The first person who interviews you, at some point they're going to say, "Any questions for me?" Right now, hopefully you haven't waited until they asked. Hopefully you've been engaging, right? But they're still going to ask the question, and turn around, sit up straight, put your shoulders back, make eye contact, and go, "What do you like most about working here?" Right? And if it takes them a while to respond, if they have to formulate their words just right, maybe there's not a whole lot of good about working here. But if they sit up straight, if they smile, if they just light up, well, that's for at least them, that's a pretty good company to work for, right? Don't settle there. Now say, what do you dislike most about working here? What keeps you up at night? What worries you the most about working here? Same process. If they're trying to be politically correct, because they're trying to sell you, right? So if they're fumbling for the right words, well, maybe the culture isn't as good as they're trying to sell you on, right? Last hint, and I know I've gone on way too long for one question, but last hint is say, "Can I meet members of the team?" Right now, you don't even care if the answer is yes or no. If it's yes, great. Now that's like your second interview or your third interview. If the answer is no, then that's not a culture you want to go into. It's no, if I can't meet the people that I'm going to be working with and for, why would I come here? Right? What are you hiding? right? So there's a whole bunch of things. And by the way, all of these questions are going to catch most of the interviewers off guard because most people don't ask these very important questions. And so expect that moment of silence, maybe even an awkward moment or two, and let them, don't say anything, don't add on, just let them sit there and think, and you'll learn a lot.
Yeah, those some great tips for kind of assessing company culture, coming in the interview process. I would just add, like, this is where networking, like just being good at networking, period, is a great skill. Like, I've talked about it on this podcast a whole bunch for a lot of other reasons, but just the ability to be able to reach out to someone unrelated to your hiring process that works there, or asking for an introduction from somebody else that you know to someone, and getting the real deal, who's got no vested interest in like trying to get you there, because you're trying to get to truth. And so if you can just have a cup of coffee with somebody, and I talk about investing a lot, like investing in yourself a lot, like, don't think of it as $10 that you're wasting. Like, that $10 is an investment in truth that could help you decide whether or not the next 5-10 years of your life, and however many thousands of dollars you're going to make over that time period, is the right choice. So I really talk a lot to the listeners about get really good at networking. But I appreciate all of those tips for job seekers coming in. What about the employee who's there right now? They're in that culture and they want to see a change, or the middle manager who is maybe trying to create a different subculture and influence up. Like, how does that dynamic kind of happen? Are there any quick tips for people in those situations to influence a culture to change that maybe isn't quite where they want it to be?
That's the best possible question, because who decides whether a culture is good or not? The employees, right? A CEO will get up in a town hall meeting and he or she will tell you how great we are. Well, maybe that's not your view, right? So, Michael, to answer your question, let's put people in two buckets. Let's put some people in the I'm not completely aligned with a culture, but I need this job to pay my bills.
Mm-hmm.
Those people, frankly, need to go find a culture they can align better in. Now, it doesn't have to be tomorrow. We don't want you to be evicted because you can't pay your rent, but make a plan. If you're not aligned to the values and the culture, make a plan. But don't be that toxic member of the team that just hangs on because you got to pay the bills. It's not good for anybody. It's not good for you. It's not good for your stomach lining. It's not good for your hair loss. It's not good for your weight gain. Just leave, get out, right? Now, the other bucket, there are people that are aligned with the prescribed culture, the defined culture, but the culture isn't living up to their expectations. They're not achieving personal and professional growth. They're not being shown respect. Well, here's where a term we use in the book comes in: contagious pockets of excellence. And we found throughout all the companies that we interviewed for the book that they had some level of those contagious pockets of excellence. They had some teams, their subcultures were so productive, so positive, so purposeful, that even if the culture of the company wasn't great, which usually means the leadership of the company isn't great, they still found a way to thrive. And here's what's cool about that is not only are they happy, not only are they doing good work, even though maybe the people down the hall aren't happy and aren't doing good work, people will eventually, that the leader of that group, the leader of this contagious pocket of excellence, will go to a meeting with all the other managers and the upper level senior leaders, and he'll have good numbers to report. And eventually, at some point, might take a couple months, another manager is going to go to that leader of the contagious pocket of excellence and go, "What are you doing? What you guys are just shining. You're just doing amazing work. Your people are smiling. They actually like coming to work. My team is not like that at all." And once that happens, now we can sit down and talk about, well, this is our subculture. We treat people with respect. We validate their work. We focus on personal and professional growth. We are civil. We have some varying opinions, but we listen to the point that we can, and then we go, you know what, maybe this isn't a workplace conversation, right? And And even on very contemporary issues like vaccine or no vaccine, mask or no mask, right? These people are still working amazing together because they're focused on the mission, because they've set boundaries, and because they're treating people with respect. And so that's what I would encourage everybody to do, is even if you maybe, let's just say you are a great role model for the values that are defined. Maybe you're a great productive employee, but it's still, the culture just isn't right for you, but you want to change it because you like the work, you appreciate the mission, like the product or the service, you like your boss. Then go to your boss and go, this term, I want us to be a contagious pocket of excellence. I want us to grow together. I want the team to get noticed. I want you as my manager to get noticed and promoted and to grow. And so let's formalize whatever this thing is we're doing. Let's define our own values. Let's come up with our own organizational constitution. Let's agree to treat each other with respect every day, even more than we do now. And let's create our own culture where we're all happy and we're all engaged and we're all doing good work.
Yeah, I think the key takeaway there is subcultures can exist and they can influence out. I just love that term you use, contagious pockets of excellence. I think that's fantastic.
Well, Mike, you couldn't have said it any better. Don't settle for what is, right? Absolutely don't settle for what is. Take what's working, make it better. Take what's not working and fix it. And pretty soon you have a subculture. That's like the definition of subculture. And every human being on the planet, again, from the newest intern, has a say in that.
All right, Mark, I appreciate it. Your book, Good Comes First, is coming out on September 28th, I believe. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. No, it's after 3.5 years of work, it's almost on the bookshelves.
Well, I'm excited. I'm excited to really dig into it because it's just refreshing and I think needed. And I'm glad you guys are a little bit of the tip of the spear fighting this fight in terms of respect. And I think obviously just not just in a company, but kind of in all walks of our, in all nooks and crannies of our country right now, I think it's needed. So I really appreciate the work that you're doing. Can you let our audience know anything else that you would like to leave them with, or where they can learn more about your work?
Well, the first thing I'll say is every employee most employees desire a culture that works for you. That may not be where you are now. So you're not a prisoner, you're not a victim. Fix it or get out. And that, when I'm mentoring young professionals or executives, I tell them the same thing. Like, you can't just settle for what it is. You either make it better or leave and go find a culture where you will thrive. So some old man advice there. Second, we'd love people to go to goodcomesfirst.com and not just learn about the book, but actually when you're there, take a moment and reflect and say, where am I at right now in my life? If I'm a leader, am I really putting good first? Am I treating people with respect? Am I expecting other people to treat each other with respect? If not, I need to rethink my career. I need to rethink my leadership legacy, right? And if you're an employee, just take a look and go, what's my culture really like? And what would I need to do to change that? And then once you have those answers, then decide if the book is right for you. But just take a moment and reflect. Once you get to goodcomesfirst.com, just take a moment and go, where am I at? And where do I want to be?
Excellent. Well, for all of our listeners, we will have the link to the book and links to all of Mark's socials and other things that he does on his continued meandering path. We'll have all of those linked in the show notes, so you guys can go check out more. Mark, thanks so much for this conversation. Thanks for being here. I've really enjoyed it.
Thank you, Michael, very much.